Hello everyone, my name is Michael SK, and welcome to Higurashi When They Cry Ray. It has been about a year since I finished up with the 8th chapter for Higurashi When They Cry, and I think I waited long enough. Man, I was burnt out on Higurashi content. We've been recording that for 2 years, with breaks in between the chapters, but nonetheless, pretty much going hard at it for 2 years, and I just needed a break after recording, 199 total episodes, I think is how it all broke down at the end. So I did like a special 200th video where I kind of just sat down and talked about everything that kind of went down, kind of threw my thoughts out there, and it's really hard to cover everything that Higurashi brought up. There are just so many fine details here and there, and a lot of interesting things that I completely overlooked, and a lot of ideas that I probably have changed opinions on now. Just, there's so much. There is so much. And I definitely needed a break after making that video and recording almost 200 videos on this one series, because it was quite the adventure. But now we fast forward to Higurashi When They Cry Ray, which I guess is like 3 short stories or chapters, or I don't know what they are. I think there might be some canon content, maybe. Well, honestly, it's really hard to say what's canon now because of what we now know. Regardless, there are some stories that we get to go through here, and I think one of them might be important. One of them I hear is silly. One is, I don't know. I really do not know. Regardless, we've got some stories to go through here, and I think this will, for the time being, wrap up our Higurashi When They Cry available content, at least from what I can find legally on Steam. So we'll jump in here. I do appreciate you guys being patient with me in this this long wait. I definitely could have gotten into this whenever the game dropped on Steam, I think earlier this year, but again, I was quite burned out, and I was focused on some other playthroughs at the time that I was just trying to get out of the way, so it was hard to fit this in. But I think now is an okay time. I hope you guys are ready. Hopefully I got all the settings and everything set up correctly. I based this off of like an old screenshot of the settings I had, so what the hell? The first option is the worst option. Okay, so we have, oh shit, this is gonna suck. Oh, this is gonna suck. I hate pronouncing things. Saikoroshi, which is the worst option. Hirukowashi, which is the strongest pursuer of love. I think that might be the doo-doo one. And Batsukoishi, which may also be a doo-doo. I don't know which one is the doo-doo one. Somebody said, or a group of people, some people said, that there's one in particular which is like straight ass. So, I don't know. I guess we'll just go in order here. This is a tale of Furude Rika reaching the summer of 1983. Her power allows her to choose one of many worlds, but is this world truly the best one for her? The difficulty here is malicious for all you dear connoisseurs who prefer it that way. All right, let's just read the other ones because I am curious. This is a tale of a peculiar dispute over the precious jewels. The Magatama of Fuwarazu, jewels capable of granting mutual love that befalls the club members. People who haven't played Higurashi Daybreak can enjoy this too. For other pairings, please enjoy Higurashi Daybreak. Okay, well, I don't know about all that, but that one sounds silly. Within these pages is a Bible of blazing passion for today's modern apathetic youths. Even though it was meant as an after-party for a Meakashi-hen, it completely ruins the impact of that chapter. Deemed too dangerous for consumption, this legendary scenario was sealed away. Continue only if you can vow that you are true... What? Okay, you know what? This is the doo-doo one. They're using the term degenerate here. This has to be the one to avoid, or at least the one to leave for last. So we'll go in order here. Oh, how I miss the child's laughter. Yeah, I'm excited. There's a part of me that's like ready to go here. I'm not gonna read that out loud. I can never get these in. I'll just read it in my head, and you guys should too. Are you guys excited? I know I am. That name is that name, you know, that I finally get that name. That name stands out now. I'm never recording that game. I just hope you guys all know that. The cicada's chorus has been growing increasingly lively. The strange weather during the never-ending June had been hot enough to make us feel like summer had come early. But even so, it was still only June. Once we got closer to summer in July, the season graced us with even more summery weather. Ooh, things sound loud. Louder than I remember. I may make some adjustments to the settings as we go because, again, kind of just, you know, I'm gonna make adjustments now. Kind of just basing all of this off of an old screenshot from a title that may have different configurations going on. Maybe, I don't know. Today, to fulfill my dream, we all went to play at the swimming pool. The dream might have seemed humble at first, but I didn't have to look back on the 100 years journey it took to achieve it anymore. Still, I decided I shouldn't forget about it. For many people, this was a perfectly ordinary day, but for me, it had taken so many years of wandering just to get here that it made me feel faint. And remembering it made this seemingly average regular life fill me with such profound happiness. Okay, nope. The music is fucking loud. No. That is just so much louder than the voices. I don't know about sound effects, so I'm gonna leave that alone. Voices, we're about to see, I guess. So far sounding quieter than previous settings, so yeah, this is all very different. Yeah, okay, I have to increase that. Damn, yeah, it is all very different. Wait, why did the music got louder too? Fuck off. Okay, cool. Oh, how great it feels to be back, I think. Okay, the music is still loud. Sound effects can definitely turn up a little bit there. Okay, we good? We good on settings? Is music, like, not changing itself randomly? This does seem to be a little clunkier from what I'm seeing. I don't know if, like, you guys are also seeing that, but I guess it is what it is. Sadako smiled at me, looking for my agreement. So I sent her back just as brilliant a smile, expressing just how much fun all the romping about today had been. I have nothing to say. Let's just bask in the sound effects, if we will. As we all reminisce on our romp at the pool today, we got on our bikes and started on our way home. Hinamizawa didn't have any pools, so we'd gone to a public pool in Okinomiya. There was an elevation difference between the two communities, and while going downhill had been very pleasant, we had a long trip upward on our way back. For Hinamizawa children at the zenith of their energy, it wasn't much of a chore, but we naturally fell silent as we quietly pedaled up the hill. Seeing everyone so silent made me want to screw things up somehow. Messing with Sotoko at times like these was so much fun for me that you could call it the very purpose of my existence. I pedaled harder, caught up to Sotoko's bicycle as she pedaled in silence, and gave her a nudge on the shoulder.
Rika?
After pretending to be mean to Sotoko, I sped up. Of course, she sped up too and chased after me. Sotoko struggled to somehow nudge me back, but I was no slouch either. Our speeds naturally increased, and we began to quickly pass the others in the group. This was a public road, and cars sometimes came and went. But we lived here a long time, so we knew that not many cars came around at this hour.
Rika?
Therefore, it's okay to cause problems, you know? I'm gonna increase the voice volume just a nudge more here. You guys counting how many times I opened the settings? So when Sotoko said that, I thought she was just trying to distract me. A car horn. When I heard it, I realized Sotoko's warning wasn't a trick. But it was so sudden that I was overtaken with surprise. When I looked in front of me, the car was right there. I panicked and violently swung my handlebars. The motion was more than aggressive and sudden enough to throw me off balance. As my body lurched forward, I realized I was flying through the air. My nose caught the whiff of asphalt, telling me I was a moment away from being hurt.
Rika!
I heard Sotoko shriek. No, the sensation I was experiencing was so unreal that I can only say I thought I heard her. I couldn't even figure out if the side of the car coming towards me as I hurtled through the air was real. But that absence of reality probably only lasted about 1 second. Or less. I wasn't even given the time to say, oops. Damn, we experienced death early. Alright, cool. I heard the cries of Higurashi in the distance. In those cries dwelt such cool tenderness that I wanted to listen forever. Eventually, the silence was broken. The sound of many footsteps approached, pulling my mind back to reality. Suddenly, the cries of the Higurashi were gone. The cries filling the room were that of cicadas. I thought I'd been hearing the Higurashi this whole time. Was that a dream? I was in a bed. I didn't recognize the ceiling. Now I do. Where was I? The room was small, with an office desk and shelves full of medicine. I recognized the smell of that medicine, and the voices of children mixing with the cicada's cries. I knew right away. I was at school. I was in bed at the nurse's office. The door opened and Chie appeared. Behind her was Sotoko and... my mind went blank. It was the face of someone who couldn't have been there.
大丈夫ですか? Furudeさん。よかった。本当に心配しましたよ。もうすぐ診療所の先生が来てくれますからね。まだ横になっていてください。よかった。
What the fuck? Yo, what's poppin'?
本当に心配したよ。
Why is the music so loud? Oh, I guess it's not. I guess it's just me. Alright, I'm losing my mind, honestly. The music just sounds so much louder. Even so, I have the sliders so freaking low. Like, I'm looking at the levels too. That is like pretty dang loud for music. You know what? It's going even lower now. I don't even care. This shit weird. My mind was still blank. Dazed, I kept staring at his face as he spoke words of concern. This person could not possibly be at school in 1983.
Satoshi. 大丈夫? まだ 調子良くないみたいだね。
Did we do some sort of like world jumping? Well, wait, no, that's like a consistent thing. Satoshi always like gets put into the situation that he gets put into.
先生が来てくれるまで横になっていなさい。それより北条聡子さん、どこに隠れました？
Chie raised her voice and turned back towards the hallway before Sudoku poked her face out, looking as though she was sulking.
私そんなに強く投げてないもん。フルデさんが大げさなだけだもん。
そんな謝り方はありません。
Oh yeah, things are totally different here. What the fuck?
ちゃんとフルデさんに謝りなさい。
I sensed something a little strange about Sudoku's tone and mood. Yeah, the way that she like... What the fuck? In any case, judging by the situation, Sudoku had done something to me. And as a result, I'd been carried to the nurse's office. That's how it looked to me. But didn't I pass out after falling off my bike on the way home from Okonomiya with everyone?
ほら、聡子さん。
Chie called Sudoku in a firm voice. Chie called Sudoku-san before Satoshi went missing. The only time there were two people named Hojo was when Sudoku and Satoshi were both here together. In other words, before June 1982. Then, was this the past? Was I repeating everything again? I felt a chill start to crawl through me. I'd gone through all that hardship to get past June of 1983, and now the world had rewound to the past again. The dead end of June 1983 that I challenged for over 100 years, and finally broke through. Would I have to defeat it again? I certainly learned many things and defeated my fate with certain willpower, but I was also saved by a lot of luck. There was no proof I could challenge June 1983 again and defeat it like I did last time, which meant I was probably hit by that car in the bike accident and killed. And just before dying, I had rejected death and rewound the world. The way that unrealistic memory cut off was definitely similar to when I'd rewound the world previously. Then would I have to undertake a terribly long journey again? That can't be. The idea was infinitely terrifying. As it dawned upon me, I felt as though my vision was growing distant. I still hadn't fully understood just how terrifying this was just yet.
ほら、聡子、謝らないとダメだよ。
フルデさん、後ろからボールをぶつけてごめんなさいでした。
Okay, there's something happening here in this world. There's some weird shit happening here.
だって、
Like
ぼ
a
んやり
lot
突っ
of
立って
it.
て邪魔だったんだもん。
Sudoku's apology was strange. It wasn't even an apology, really. It literally sounded like an excuse. She looked at Chie and Satoshi, wondering if that was enough. It didn't seem like Sudoku had any intention of apologizing for throwing the ball at me. Because Sudoku wasn't even looking at me, not really. It was like I didn't belong in her world. She'd never treated me this coldly before. And before anything else, she's talking strangely. Yeah, the way that she's actually referring to Rika by a last name and honorific instead of just Rika, you know, that shows that there's more of a distance. So that's one strange thing. Satoshi being here, that's another strange thing. The way that Sudoku is also, I don't know if we can say yet that she was aggressive towards Rika, but just that, like, that gap. I don't know, things just seem so different. Like, in one fucking scene, there's so many things that just seem different. It didn't seem like the situation that had befallen me was a rewind to so far in the past that Satoshi was still around. Something else had happened. Something bizarre that I didn't understand. That's how I felt as I listened to the odd way Sudoku was talking. She sounded far more normal than the Sudoku I knew. And she's gone. Sudoku made a face, like reading out a standard written apology was enough, and then ran off into the hallway. She did her YouTube apology, she's gone. She did her dues. I checked the clock, it was right in the middle of afternoon break. She was probably rushing back to the schoolyard because she didn't want to miss any more playtime. As she turned her back on me and ran away, I suddenly felt very cold and sad. If the Sudoku I knew had hurt me enough to put me in the nurse's office, she would have stayed with me the entire time. Her footsteps vanished before she'd even looked at me once more. It didn't seem like she hated me. It felt like she wasn't even interested. What was happening? What year and what month was it right now, anyway? Hanyu was nowhere to be found. Oh, yeah. I kind of forgot about Hanyu. Whoopsies. Despite wanting to know, no calendar or anything like one was nearby, so it didn't seem like I could find out right now. Most normal people would give you a strange look if you asked what the year and month were, and I had learned from my long journey that I had to be careful about that. Instead, I decided to push that question aside for the moment.
ごめんね、リカちゃん。サトコには後でよく言っておくよ。きっとリカちゃんが寂しそうにしてたんで、遊びに誘ってあげたかったんだよ。
み、ありがとうなのです。もう気にしてませんので、いいのですよ。
As Satoko's older brother, Satoshi apologized in her stead. He seemed no different from the Satoshi I knew.
そう。じゃあ、僕はもう行くから。
ありがとうなのですよ、サトシ。
It's also hard to, keep a mentality here that, oh yeah, this is just a normal world with, different happenings or what have you. No, there's so much, underground shit happening, too. There's a full-on disease that everybody's basically infected with now as well. And so it's really hard to just, stay calm. There's a lot of factors at play here, whatever's happening. Satoshi gave a little wave of his hand, turned, and left the nurse's office. A new set of footsteps approached in his place. From their pace and sound, it wasn't a child. It was probably Coach. Chie had called for him.
先生、急にお呼びしてしまってすみません。さっき意識が戻ったところなんです。
そうですかね。それはよかったよかった。
That's not Coach. It was a throaty voice. It wasn't Irie? The man who suddenly appeared was one I'd never seen in the clinic or even at the Irie Institute. He was a very large... Why did I throw very in there? He was a large man with round curves, the exact opposite of Irie. The stubble on his face made him seem rugged. He was so distinct that I wouldn't forget him even if I'd only met him once. And yet I had no recollection of him. But he was wearing a white robe, and Chie had called him the doctor from the clinic, so he must have been a doctor from the Irie clinic. But I'd never met him before.
やあ、リカちゃん。災難だったな。ボールがぶつかったのは後頭部？ちょっと見せてもらっていいかい？
Without waiting for an answer, the mountaineerish doctor felt around the back of my head. His fingers were uncultured, completely different from Irie's delicate hands.
今度は目を見せてくれるかい？大丈夫みたいだな。
No concussion?
何か頭痛とかはするかい？酔うとか平衡感覚がおかしいとかあるかな？
ないのです。
多分大丈夫とは思いますけどね。
Wow, great.
念のため診療所に連れて行って脳波を見ましょう。
Okay, and you know what? Never mind. I was about to talk
わしの
shit.
見たところ問題なしですな。
Gahahaha. The doctor laughed uproariously, spraying spittle everywhere. Chie gave a look of relief too, as if that was a sign that there were no problems.
そうですか。では、念には念ということで、よろしくお願いいたします。フルデさん、先生と一緒に診療所に行ってきてください。
午後の診療が始まる前に済ませてしまおう。さあ、行こう。
The big doctor, acting too familiar for my tastes, pushed me out the door, and before I could fight my feeling of wrongness, I was taken out of the nurse's office. What was this world? Sometimes the dice came up with strange numbers and caused little differences, but this was the first world that felt this wrong to me. Did the dice rolls turn up something rare? After repeating this world for over 100 years, I thought I'd figured out pretty much every event, and yet this all felt so strange to me. There was something immeasurable about how strange it was, and I couldn't help but feel intensely anxious. I put my shoes on at the entrance before taken to a parked car in front of the school gate. All the while, I stared at the big man's back as he walked, racking my brains trying to remember him, but I couldn't come up with anything. No matter how much I thought back, I couldn't recall any man like this in the Mountain Dogs, much less the Irie Institute. If Satoshi was here, that meant it had to have been before June 1982. Hanyu would always be there as soon as I woke up, and she would tell me what was going on in that world. But in this world, I haven't seen Hanyu even once. The radiant sunlight, the annoying cicada cries, the lively voices of my classmates, I knew them all too well. Or all so well, but something was different. It almost made me sick. Hanyu, where am I? What kind of world is this? Hanyu didn't answer me. Fine then. If I went home and opened a bottle of wine, she'd be sure to come rushing in. Not once had she ever allowed me a few elegant minutes to myself.
みーちゃんみーちゃん
甘いね。ドッジボールの鉄則は弱いやつ狙い。私を狙うのは戦略ミスだよ。それ、次にとろいやつはお前さ。
I saw several classmates playing a game of dodgeball. Mion and Rena were there in the crowd. Rena? Any world where Rena was present was later than April 1982. Yeah, so this... Yeah, everything is so fucked up here. What the hell? And Satoshi disappeared from the village in June 1982. The only time Rena and Satoshi could be here at the same time was the short span from April to June of 1982. It didn't seem like I'd gone as far into the past as I'd feared, but I still had to repeat the June of 1983. That had not changed. Did I have to complete these long, difficult days of nothing but strife yet again? Teaming up with my friends, trusting each other, grappling with our suspicions of each other, believing in miracles, and fighting alongside everyone. And all the coincidences in the world to help save us. If we missed any one of those elements of the process, this world would end up in horrific tragedy. I'd gotten past this dead end before. This was the second time, so I understood a little of how to fight against Takano's group. So I probably wouldn't have to spend another 100 or whole 100 years. Even still, it would definitely take several of those years, if not dozens. But I never wanted to spend another day in that June of 1983 ever again. The despair I felt at reaching the goal once, then getting kicked back to the start. I got into the man's car, and as if bumped over the rough roads, I sorted out the situation I was in. That day, in July 1983, I went to have a good time at the pool with everyone, and on the way home, there was an accident, and I died. And right before dying, I used the power I never thought I'd have to use again to turn back time once more. This world was probably in June of 1982. That, or it is actually 1983, and shit is really weird. It was considerably hot, so the Watanagashi festival couldn't be far off. That meant the countdown to Satoshi's disappearance had already begun. Earlier in the nurse's office, he'd given me kind and considerate words, but an unyielding darkness would have been starting to take control of his heart, his fear of his inescapable terminal illness's footsteps. I thought back to how the Hojo siblings had looked in the nurse's office, and to Sadako and Satoshi's everyday sibling relationship. It would cease to be an everyday thing in just another few days or weeks. Sadako's somewhat cold treatment of me had hurt, but when I remembered that, I felt pity for her. Sadako, for now at least treasure that time. Your relationship with Satoshi is limited. That cruel fact hadn't been overruled a single time in any of these 100 years of worlds. In other words, it was inevitable. I can only sympathize with the fate awaiting Sadako now. Eventually, the Irie clinic came into view. Every time I saw it, I was struck by its magnificence. It was almost too much for Hinamizawa, but this time the clinic building felt a little dull, as though affected by the sadness coloring my heart. The car came to a stop in the employee parking lot near the back entrance.
歩けるかい？具合は大丈夫かな？
全然平気なのです。検査なんて大げさなのですよ。
Oh, we getting that brain scan. You can't be too cautious when it comes to concussions.
頭はその場では何もなくても、後から突然来ることもあるから怖いんだ。きっちり検査しような。何事もなければ午後の授業には戻れるよ。
What the fuck? Don't these scans usually take a good amount of time? This was the first time that I'd met this strange doctor, but he didn't seem unreliable. Maybe the cloudiness in my expression made me look like I was worried my injury was serious, and that was why he tried to cheer me up. His attempt at encouragement was off base, but for now, I told myself that he wasn't a bad person at least. The air inside the clinic smelled unfamiliar to me. Inside it was the same clinic as the one I knew, but something was different. On the whole, it felt odd, or old, like I'd find cobwebs if I looked, and I recognized none of the nurses we passed. The only people I knew were some elderly villagers chatting as they watched TV in the waiting room.
あんで、リカちゃんじゃねえの。どうしちゃったの？風邪？
校庭で飛んできたボールが後頭部に当たったんですよ。一応脳波を見ておこうと思いましてね。
頭は怖いからね。
That's what I'm saying.
でも、若いんだから、ボールの一つや二つ、平気平気。
The old people laughed aloud, as though rubbing some spit on the bump would fix it. Something about their behavior was strange too. The people I knew would get out their beads, start praying, and make a big fuss just because I got a bump on the head. Maybe they would say 1 or 2 balls is fine because you're young, if I were a normal child. But for me in particular, in Hinamizawa, that was impossible. This all seemed very wrong. Something huge, something I could not ignore, was different about this world. Well, yeah, most definitely.
入って入って。
After the large man went straight into the examination room, he called me in. The Queen Carrier had come for an examination, and the next logical step was that Irie, the director, would appear, but he hadn't appeared yet. The discomfort that I'd been feeling this whole time got even stronger, and then I spotted something odd. It was a notice from the hospital hung in the waiting room. Please be sure to bring your insurance card on your first checkup of the month. Takano Clinic. Uh-oh. Yeah, things are fucking backward as hell here. Takano Clinic? I looked around at the other notices hung about the waiting room. All of them had Takano Clinic written at the end. Not a single one said Irie Clinic. Where am I?
リカちゃん、どうぞ。時間ないから早く入って。
I heard the man's deep voice from the examination room again, and I ignored him and burst out the front entrance. Why? Because I wanted to know the name of this clinic. Methinks it, yeah, there we go. Methinks it says Takano Clinic. It looked exactly like the Irie Clinic I knew, but there it was, the answer to why everything felt so out of place.
ここどこよ
I could feel the strength drain from my body. My legs gave out and I sat. For a while I stared dumbly up at the name that was inexplicably different. I'm not sure how long I stayed like that. Eventually the big doctor from before and a nurse came running out. They asked me if I suddenly felt sick, and if I didn't answer, they would annoyingly get even more concerned. So somewhat offhandedly, I lied that I felt a little dizzy for a moment, but they must have thought that the vertigo pointed to a symptom of something. They picked me up and brought me into the examination room, hooked me up to an EEG terminal, and told me to rest.
本当に何でもないのです。めんどくさそうだったので、逃げちゃおうと思ったら、転んでしまっただけなのですよ。
何でもないかは医者が決める。わしがいいと言うまでそこに横になっていなさい。いいかね。
I felt like the more I tried to say, the more complicated things would get, so for now I decided to play along so I can get out of there.
先生、入江というお医者はいますか？
何？誰だって？
入江です。
入江？それはリカちゃんの主治医かい？どこの病院だい？
Oh, EDA is not a doctor here. Or maybe in general. We're getting nowhere. Is EDA not in this world? Compared to everything the other adults like Akasaka and Kasai did during the long battle of June 19th, EDA's presence might have seemed to matter little, but it was extremely important that he was around. Without his determination to sever the chain of sadness created by Hinamizawa syndrome, well, there was essentially no way for Hinamizawa to break free of its 1,000-year curse. And Irie wasn't here. Plus, Irie was my only ally who knew I was the Queen Carrier. That ally was gone. The strange ways Sadako was talking. The absence of my only ally from Tokyo, Irie. No doubt some unpleasant die had landed on a 1. And then despite my ally Irie not being here, was Takano still behind everything? When you get one bad roll, you get a bunch more.
高野先生はずいぶん前にお亡くなりになられてるよ。
What the fuck?
この村にこんな立派な診療所を建てられた功績を称えてね。
Bro,
その
what
名を
is
診療
happening?
所名に残してるんだよ。
What is going
わし
on?
はお会いしたことはないんだが、大変立派な先生だったという話だよ。
立派な先生ですか。
Would the occult-obsessed Takano ever be praised as a splendid doctor? And she passed away a while ago. When I looked around the examination room, I found a picture of some old people hanging in a frame. On it was written founder and first director Hifumi Takano. Hifumi Takano. Wasn't that the man Takano looked up to? Who she called her grandfather? He was the first one to discover the Hinamizawa syndrome, but nobody accepted his theories about it and he passed away in despair. Takano had understood his chagrin and eventually made a big decision, and then began to build a future so stable you could call it fate. That Takano.
鳥の鷹の鷹野さん?
Maybe the situation here is not what we think. Maybe things went in a much better direction.
高い低いの鷹野先生じゃなくて? わしは知らんがね。看護師さんにもいないし、わしが来る前に辞めた古い看護師さんかね？
違うと思います。若い女なのです。
うちにはそんな人はおらんがね。そんな看護師さんがいたら、ぜひうちに勤めてもらいたいね。
Well, this doctor is definitely a character here in this village. Weird ass comments. I mean, come on now. The man guffawed with delight. He certainly didn't look like he was lying. He was speaking the truth. Then even Takano was gone. Irie was absent, Takano was absent. The Irie Institute didn't have its director or vice director. What did that all mean? Who was the director then? Oh, and what about the mountain dogs? The Irie Institute was at its heart a research institution. Without them acting as its hands and feet, it could not exist.
おこのぎ造園という造園屋さんはありますですか？
え？造園屋さん？さあね。造園屋さんにご縁があったことはないからね。ちょっとわかりかねるけど、それはどこの業者さん？
沖宮に事務所があったと思いましたです。
なら後で電話帳で調べてみたらいい。個人では載せない人もいるけど、会社とかなら大抵は載ってると思うがね。
Could the Irie Institute not exist in this world? Would that mean this world did not have a dead end at all? I couldn't figure anything out. Which dice were showing 1 and which were showing 6? Or was the stranger part the dots on the dice themselves? The game board I was a piece on now and the game board I knew, were they different? Well, let's be a little more optimistic. Was it possible that Tokyo hadn't chosen Irie but this man instead? Then would this man know that I was the Queen Carrier? If he did, then a number of things would fall into place. The prudence of giving me a brain scan after just getting knocked over by a ball to the head. Wasn't that because he knew I was special? That I was the Queen Carrier? Then was this man playing the role of Irie in this world? I looked at the name tag on the robe that he put on after coming into the room and read the name.
Yamamoto.
It was a natural response. It seemed the name Yamamoto wasn't a problem. Was this Yamamoto person the director of the Irie Institute, or rather the Yamamoto Institute, excuse me? It was also possible that he'd crowned this clinic with the Takano name in commemoration of him succeeding Hifumi Takano's research.
山本は、ひなみざわ症候群のことは、わかりますか？
Hinamizawa なんだって？
僕が女王感染者だとか、わかりますか？
女王様リカちゃんじゃまだお姫様ってところだな。将来は女王様になりたいのかい？そりゃでっかい夢だね。
I don't think we're getting anywhere here.
はい、OK。もう外していいよ。
I learned from just that short exchange that Yamamoto had nothing to do with the Hinamizawa syndrome. There were a few people unconnected to Tokyo in the Irie Institute too, but they were only a small handful of nurses and office workers. And besides, the Queen Carrier was currently in the clinic. Anyone connected to the Hinamizawa syndrome would have come rushing to me. Yamamoto had rushed to me, but he didn't know I was the Queen Carrier. What did that mean? I listened hard to try and catch the sound of Irie's indiscreet laughter, but all I heard was the TV in the waiting room and the motor of the goldfish aquarium. That maid-obsessed man was with his ulterior motives during checkups was nowhere to be seen in the examination room. It was simply uncomfortable, and the smells of dust and medicine made me feel unpleasant. Now I knew. This really wasn't the clinic I knew. It wasn't just a strange feeling anymore, it was a clear fact now. Yamamoto left for a moment and then came back and told me there was nothing wrong with my readings.
具合が悪いところがないなら学校にもう戻ってもいいよ。もうすぐ午後の診療が始まっちゃうから送ってあげられないけど、一人で学校まで行けるかい？みーじゃはいかいいえかわかんないよ。どっちだい？
はい、大丈夫です。一人で学校に戻れますです。
そうか。じゃあもう行きなさい。千恵先生には学校にこれから戻ると電話しておくよ。
When I saw Yamamoto pick up the phone on the table, I spotted a tabletop calendar next to it. June, Showa 58. Showa 50... What was that in AD again? The Pacific War ended in Showa 20, which was 1945. 58 minus 20. And I'm bad at borrowing, but luckily I don't need it. 58 minus 20 equals 38. Yeah, 38 plus 20 is definitely 58. Then if you add 38 to 1945, 45 plus 38 is 83. It's 1983? June. Wasn't that the same period of time I had just been living in? But, huh? That's impossible. In 1983, Satoshi is here? I'm telling you, I think we're exactly where we're at. We didn't necessarily go too far back in time. It's just shit's so fucking fucky here. And Irie isn't here, Takano isn't here, Sotoko's acting strangely, and even Hanyu is gone. Where am I? Hanyu, I know you're wasting time somewhere. Get over here with your ow-ows and tell me what kind of world this is. Or, we can just commit suicide and, find another world. But honestly, I'm very curious about this one. I walked through downtown on my way back to school. All the storefronts were familiar, nothing had changed. But for some reason, there were less people, and more stores with their shutters closed. This apparent state of decline reminded me of New Year's or New Year's Eve. It was a strange sight during the season when you could hear cicadas crying. I barely passed anyone, and even when old people walked by, they didn't talk to me. Normally, if I met an old person in the middle of the day like this, they would ask me if I had a cold and was staying home from school, or they would start rubbing their prayer beads and saying weird things. And there was none of that. Just like the old people in the clinic, they reacted with disinterest. I wasn't in the mood for it anyway, so I was thankful that they didn't do any of that. But there was already a heap of oddities before me, and I couldn't help but feel like it was growing even bigger. Afternoon break was long over by the time I got back to school, and it was now time for afternoon classes. I went through the entrance and changed into my slippers, and then I noticed another strange thing. There were a lot of empty shoe cubbies. Empty was different from absent. Anyone enrolled would leave either their slippers or regular footwear in their locker, no matter what. If neither were present, that meant that they weren't in this class to begin with. Sometimes people took their slippers home to wash during the weekends, but any lockers being empty during the day was unthinkable. I counted a little over 10 pairs of shoes. That was only half of how many people were in the school I knew. Everything was so messed up. I had no idea what was going on. I steeled myself and opened the classroom door. Man, it's really hard to say what is actually happening here, but there's a decline of people. There's no interest in Rika. Satoshi is here for some reason. Sotoko is acting very cold towards her. There doesn't seem to be a club or group. No sign of Keiichi. I feel like I'm missing somebody else. I don't know, just Hanyu's not here. Yeah, just a lot of oddities. Everyone turned around to look at me. There truly were only half of the familiar classmates there. And they weren't absent, because only half as many seats were actually in the classroom.
フルデさん、着席してください。はいはい、皆さん。授業中ですよ。ドリルに集中して。
Chie clapped her hands and everyone looked back down at their desks and workbooks, ignoring me altogether. My seat. Satoshi was sitting at the desk next to Sotoko's. That didn't seem to be my seat. Then where was it? Soon I found an open seat looking small and quiet in the back near the window. I could tell it from the pattern of the floor cushion with my disaster hood in it. That seemed to be Rika Furude's seat in this world. It was in the corner, as though the classroom had forgotten about it. There were no seats next to it, and nobody would see it when looking at the blackboard. In a place where I wouldn't block anyone's view whether or not I wasn't there. That seat was almost symbolic of how I'd been feeling ever since I awoke. I sat down and took out my workbook. Then, pretending to study, I looked around the classroom. Mion Sonozaki was here. She didn't seem very different. Rena Ryugu was here too. The way she was helping the child in the next seat over with his work was very like her. Sotoko and Satoshi were studying together as friendly siblings. Satoshi, being the older brother, was teaching her things, but Sotoko looked disgruntled, and his words went in one ear and out the other. To me, it was almost like she didn't hate studying, she just didn't like their roles being reversed since she looked after him at home, and it made me smile a little. I still felt a tiny pain in my chest from Sotoko's cold treatment of me in the nurse's office, but as far as I could tell by looking at her individually, she seemed totally normal. But I still couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong there. When Sotoko was with Satoshi, she was often gloomy because of problems at home or their aunt's abuse, so they were acting like normal siblings, and though I knew it was rude to Sotoko, that felt wrong. But if Sotoko had a normal life, that was fine. Hey, no stress, no syndrome to worry about. But also, that's another question. Is there really a syndrome now at place here? Is there a disease that everybody is technically infected with? Or are things so different where that just also doesn't exist? The bigger shock, though, was the absence of the most important person in our group of friends. I looked around the room several times for him, but he was not here. Keiichi Maibara was not here. I made multiple excuses like I was seeing right, or he happened to be absent today. But even the list of students on cleaning duty hanging on the wall didn't have Keiichi's name on it. Everyone in the class would have had their names on there, but Keiichi's wasn't. Keiichi Maibara did not exist in this classroom. Even though it was June of 1983 in this world. I see. On rare occasions, there would be a world where Keiichi hadn't moved here. It wasn't the first time, but it was a sad thing. Keiichi was an important key to crushing the fate of June 1983. If he wasn't on the game board, then this game was predetermined to be a loss. But was this even a game at all? No Irie, no Takano, no signs of the Institute from Tokyo researching Hinamizawa syndrome. If none of them were here, didn't that mean that there was nobody at all to fight? If I didn't need to fight, then, in a sense, Keiichi's absence wasn't an issue. Actually, in this case, June 1983 wasn't fated to be a dead end, and In other words, in this world, the 1,000 dice all turned up ones, and that changed that absolute fate that Takano had constructed with her certain willpower into something else? I had no idea what was what. Could this world even be explained by what dots came up on the dice? Where am I? Someone tell me. Oh, I love this. Oh, I love the mystery. Obviously unable to focus during class, my head was filled with the listless cries of the cicadas and the feeling of being out of place that I couldn't get rid of.
Kids! Lei!
Thankfully, Mion was still class president. I was just about to point that out. So there are some normal things going on here, kinda, but there's more not so normal things compared to the things that we're actually used to. So I still feel very uncomfortable. For some reason, that was a relief. Oh, was there even a club in this world? I don't think so. I really don't think so. If I could receive the baptism of those crazy club games, maybe it would cheer up my feelings a little. On days we had club, she'd always call all the members right when school ended. Expecting that, I stayed in my seat as everyone ran out into the hallway. Sadako was one of those who dashed out. She was flying headlong towards the entrance, jostling the other kids her age. Satoshi left too, following behind her. Mion and Rena talked to each other as they got ready to leave. As far as it looked, we didn't have club. The club was annoying at times, but I yearned for it so much now. Was there no club in this world? As I started to feel lonely, I saw a grin spread across Mion's face before she and Rena approached me. Normally that grin would look gross, but when Mion did it, it didn't feel bad. Our eyes met. Thank goodness. Even this world had the after-school club it was supposed to. I don't know. I think this is something else.
Hey, hey, Rika ちゃま。お帰りになる前にちょいといい？
部活なのですか？
For the first time since coming to this world, I smiled. I had no idea what was going on in this world, so having one of my hopes come true made me very happy for the moment.
違うよ。明日の日直でしょ？はい、これ日誌ね。で、部活って。なんだ、リカちゃんも私の部に入りたいの？
I gleaned two things from Mion's few words. One was that I still wasn't a club member. The other was that even so, the club still existed. For me right now, that was an incredibly happy thought.
ならばフルでリカ。君に我が部への入部を許可しよう。
みーちゃんおかしい。
Rena laughed like it was a funny joke, but why?
ただ、リカちゃんとは同じ部になれても、部活動は一緒にはできないんだよね。
どうしてなのですか？
だって、リカちゃんちと私たちんち方向違うじゃない？
Oh. When Mion said her club, she probably meant the club of not having a club, the going home club. And she must have been saying we went home in different directions, which was why I couldn't do club activities, going home together with her. In other words, the club doesn't exist in this world either.
みーちゃん、その部活動、たまにはリカちゃんと一緒でもいいんじゃないかな。
逆方向じゃん。
たまにはいいんじゃないかな。かな。
After I realized I'd have to go home all alone, Rena said that she'd leave school with me. That kind consideration was just like the Rena I knew so well. We didn't have club, but Mion and Rena were still Mion and Rena.
私は悪いけどパスするわ。チャキチャキ直帰して、おじさんとこバイト行かないとなんないんで。
そっか。じゃあ、帰宅部の放課後活動は、私とリカちゃんの2人でしよっか。ありがとです。レナ。
What a very odd feeling. Just in general. I don't know what words I could use to describe it, but oh man. The three of us headed for the entrance. Our outdoor shoes were the only ones left.
僕が知っているより上履きの数が少ないのです。
Yeah, I decided to naturally mention it. Rena responded right away.
寂しいけど仕方ないよね。
よらば大樹、長いものにはぐるぐるってとこさね。そんじゃ悪いけど、私はこのまま失礼させてもらうわ。じゃ、レイナ、リカちゃんのエスコートお願いね。
Hey, yo, wait a minute.
レイな。何？なんでもないです。
Rena was the kind Rena I knew, but her name wasn't Rena. Reina. That was Rena's real name, but in the worlds I knew, she'd thrown it aside, which meant she hadn't given up being Reina, or her path leading to today was different from the one in the worlds I knew. I knew Rena hated herself because she considered herself responsible for her mother's divorce, and that she had messed up both her life and herself. But she would have decided to part ways with that old self, start over, and rename herself Rena. But that didn't happen. That wasn't the only thing I learned from this conversation either. Regarding the number of people in the class, when I mentioned there weren't many people, they acted like there was a reason. That meant the current number of students in this world hadn't been that way from the start. It had decreased to this number. Mion ran off, and Rena and I left school together. Let's see if we can get that information out of her. When we went across the schoolyard, I saw Sotoko fooling around playing tag.
さとこちゃんを見てるの？
Her name was different, but she still picked up on these things quickly.
さとこちゃんも悪気があってボールをぶつけたんじゃないと思うよ。許してあげて。別にどうとも思っていませんですよ。
Reina seemed to be trying to smooth it over. It kind of sounded like Sotoko and I weren't normally friendly with one another. So I asked.
僕とさとこは友達ではないのでしょうか？そんなことないよ。ちゃんと同じクラスの友達だよ。
That doesn't equal friendship, though. Even so, it kinda should here in Hinamizawa. I mean, that's kind of been like the tight-knit sort of feeling that this whole village really has. The way she said that was enough of an answer. Now I knew why Sotoko acted so coldly to me in the nurse's office. In this world, Sotoko and I were not friends. Maybe that made sense. After all, if Satoshi was alive and well, then Sotoko would spend all her time with him. The reason Sotoko and I got to the point where we could call close, was because Sotoko ended up all alone, and I asked her to stay at my house, and we started living together. Of course, we were friends before that too, just nowhere near how close we were in 1983. Maybe in the end our relationship was nothing more than me sitting in Satoshi's empty seat. When I thought about that, when I considered what would happen if Satoshi was around in June 1983, maybe this was the most natural future. With regretful eyes, I watched as Sotoko frolicked about. Sotoko looked like she was having a lot of fun with her other classmates. She wouldn't ever notice me going home from school. I'm gonna stop thinking about it so much. Before the true world I need to reach, this world is all but a defective one. I don't need to bother trying to understand a broken world. So suicide time? Maybe? I mean, that's the quick way out of this shit, unless we really want to learn about it, which Rika doesn't seem to want to learn about it.
ずいぶん空いてるお店も減ったね。
When we went through downtown with all its stores with their shutters down, Reina spoke up. I didn't care about this world anymore, but as a classmate going home with her, I answered unconsciously.
どうしてこんなにもお店が減ってしまったのでしょう。それは当然だよ。来年までしか営業できないもんね。
Oh.
来るお客さんだって減る一方だし、早めにお店を畳んじゃう人がいてもおかしくないよ。どうして来年までしか営業できないのですか？
'Cause we getting flooded.
仕方ないよ。立ち退きだし。立ち退き？残念だけど仕方ないもんね。それに村は沈んでも村が育んでくれた私たちの魂が滅びるわけじゃない。
I gave a start when I heard that. That couldn't... No, it was possible. In every single world, the story of Hinamizawa being submerged under an artificial lake was always present, but the Irie Institute, working from the shadows, would make sure that the dam project was cancelled. If there was no Irie Institute around to make them cancel it, that meant the dam project was proceeding as planned and...
じゃあ村はダムに。注水は来年で決定らしいよ。水没にはかなり日数がかかるそうだけど、私は見たくないな。湖になった後ならともかく、沈んでる最中を見るのは悲しいかな。反対運動とかはなかったのですか？最初はあったらしいね。でも国の発展のために私たちだけがわがままを言うわけにもいかないし、よくは知らないけど国の人も親身になって相談に乗ってくれたらしいよ。
The damn conflict I was hearing from Reina wasn't even a conflict in this world. Everything regarding the dam was completely different from the worlds I knew. They'd proposed the Hinamizawa Dam project, which was the same as the worlds I knew. Relations between the nation who wanted to evict us and the residents who refused gradually worsened and eventually broke down. It snowballed into a dire conflict over the dam. But in this world, it had been different from the very beginning. First off, relations between the country and the village were stormy at the very beginning, but apparently that was resolved quickly. The Sonozaki and Kimiyoshi families negotiated on the village's behalf, and they accepted the eviction on the promise of a large sum of compensation money. After that, the conversation was between the three families and the villagers. Nobody wanted to part with the soil of their ancestors. But for the villagers, who certainly couldn't be called wealthy, the money the nation would provide was no trivial matter. They worried over it to no end. Rumors flew about, wondering if Oyashiro-sama's curse would befall them if they abandoned these lands. But the Furude family head, my father in other words, declared we couldn't be cursed if we built Oyashiro-sama a new shrine somewhere else and remembered to honor him. Despite many objections, the elderly agreed on a cooling-off period of several years. In addition to the compensation money, they demanded from the government the movement of the Furude Shrine, the graveyard, and its symbolic trees, in addition to the guarantee of a new place they could call Hinamizawa. And if those requests were fulfilled, they would consider agreeing to the eviction. Wow. Just wow. The nation consented to this. They proposed preferential occupation rights to reclaimed public housing land in Shishibone. With regards to giving the town a new name, they considered the residents' proposal as most important, and they consented to the movement of the shrine, graveyard, and other locations as well. In conclusion, though there were several years of turmoil, the dam conflict never happened in this world, and everything was resolved through talking alone. And the villagers had actually agreed to the dam project. Actual construction on the dam had begun a few years ago, and apparently construction vehicles were a constant source of traffic on the village's wider roads. And the eviction deadline was set at the end of April next year, so more than a few families had begun moving out in advance. Once closed shop's shutter had a worn paper notice on it. I said one, not once. On it was written, "Our deepest gratitude for your many years of patronage." I spotted a few other notices with "opposed to the dam" on them, but those had deteriorated over time, a silent indication that the dam war was a thing of the past now.
クラスの子も全員が公営住宅に行くわけじゃないみたいだね。さとこちゃんちなんかはよそへ引っ越しちゃうみたいだよ。仲良しのみんな全員と会えるのも来年までかと思うと。
The village I was born and grew up in being submerged was very sad, but all my classmates enjoying this day to the fullest even though they knew that seemed so strong to me. And if the dam war never took place, that would cause several other effects. For example, the relationship between the Sonozaki and the Hojo families. At the beginning of the dam conflict, the Hojos declared themselves in favor of the dam, with the Sonozakis in opposition, and the former ended up a scapegoat of the village for a long time. But that trouble never occurred in this world.
さとこちゃんのお家？さあ、普通だと思うけど、別にみーちゃんちとも特別接点はないと思うけどな。さとこは 家族と仲良くできてますか？あ、お父さんの話？
Even without the dam conflict, the presence of a stepfather would be a burden on Sadako's mind. And with the L5 symptoms appearing, she would push him from the viewing platform at the park and be given into the care of her malicious aunt and uncle. Because her stepfather's presence would be the very gateway to Sadako's later unfortunate fate.
今にして思うと、最初の頃のギクシャクした関係もいい思い出かもしれないね。血がつながっていない親子だからこそ、互いが父であろう、娘であろうと努力することによって、ひょっとすると実の親子より強い絆を作れることもあるかもしれないもの。私も何度かお話をしたことあるけど、家族を支えようと頑張るいい人だったよ。それ、さとこの今のお父さんの話なのですか？うん。
Which meant that in this world, none of the dice threatening Sadako had come up on a 1. For Sadako, did that make this world a happy place for her? My walk home with Reina was very significant for me understanding this world, and I found out that this world's composition betrayed every last bit of my common sense. The reason Reina wasn't Rena. That was different from the very start. First, the Ryugu family didn't move to Ibaraki. They had lived in Hinamizawa this entire time. Her mother was still working as a designer at a small company in the city. Her father had switched careers and now was a salesman for his wife's designs. Alright, cool. The couple must have been on good terms for one to design things and the other to sell them. As always, her mother's position seemed to be stronger, but their relationship was an average one, and divorce at the very least seemed impossible. That meant a nice, peaceful family for Reina. That satisfied her fully, and she even said that she lived a happy life. The fact that she knew that without going through hardships, though, she really was still Rena. I asked about the Takano clinic too. It was as the big Dr. Yamamoto had said. The Takano of the Takano clinic was indeed the one who had been Mio Takano's adopted grandfather, Hifumi Takano. Right after the war, he built a surprisingly grand clinic in Hinamizawa, which had no doctors and became a celebrity of the villagers. I learned that there was a monument dedicated to Takano in the place of the one dedicated to Irie in the worlds I knew. After Takano's passing, there was nobody to succeed his place at the clinic, and for a long time it had been left empty. That was when a man from Okonomiya named Yamamoto arrived and breathed new life into the clinic. Takano had discovered the Hinamizawa syndrome and searched for research sponsors but found none, and eventually Mio Takano would succeed him. But what if the older Takano had found a sponsor? Neither Mio Takano nor Irie would appear, and the Takano clinic being built right after the war would make sense, which meant that Takano in this world had been blessed with good dice rolls. At this point, I had a vague idea about something. Weren't these dice rolls the exact opposite of the ones for the world I knew well? The people themselves hadn't changed at all, but the dice God had cast for these people were all reversed. So it made sense that it had turned into such a strange world for me. I learned one more thing from talking to Reina too. In this world I had no friends. I was all alone. Keiichi never transferred to our school, we didn't have a club, and Sadako had no connection to me, So maybe it was only natural. At that point, I finally realized why Reina had sympathized with me going home alone and done her going home club activities with me.
じゃあ、また明日ね。そっか。
For a moment I was confused when she said goodbye, since we weren't in front of the temple, but I quickly understood. We were in front of the Furude main house. Since Takano had never appeared, there was no Irie Institute, nor any research into Hinamizawa syndrome, and so my parents never died. At first, my parents cooperated with the researchers, but when I fell ill with a high fever one day, they stopped cooperating, had some kind of trouble, and were assassinated. My mother was the hysterical type, and when she had made a fuss, settling her down took a while. And because she made a fuss, the Irie Institute, which wanted to do its research in secret, naturally wanted to make sure she did not talk. she'd held such an attitude even knowing how shady the Institute was. So in a sense, I couldn't deny that she reaped what she sowed. In any case, no matter how many times I did this over, no matter how many times I had warned her, it never worked. And I had resigned myself to the fact that I'd no longer have parents by 1981. And I'd repeated it many times. I'd seen my parents for dozens of years in total, so I was fed up with them. We weren't on good terms to begin with anyway. And now in June of 1983, they were here again.
また明日会おうね。バイバイ。さよならなのですよ。ニパー。
After seeing Reina off, I looked at my real home. I saw my mother patting out a dried futon in the yard. In normal worlds, they would always die, but in this one, they were alive the whole time. I found myself unsure of how to talk to my real mother.
リカなの？お帰りなさい。
みー、ただいまなのです。
手を洗ってうがいをしなさい。それから、明日持ってく教科書は今のうちに準備しておくのよ。宿題は出なかった？
Yeah, she was my mother, all right. Honestly speaking, I wasn't used to the Furude main house. It was my true home, but it had only ever been my home before 1983. Like a prison of time while I waited in melancholy for the day that Keiichi had transferred here. But Keiichi wouldn't transfer here, and my parents would not die. Which meant in this world, I would never get out of this prison. But maybe that was a weird way to think about it. Without a dead-end fate, there was no victory or defeat, no destiny or miracles. This was my actual home. It was nothing more and nothing less. Okay, so we're going to call it here. This has been a long recording session. I've just been very invested. Wow. So what I was thinking is that this is like those, I don't know what you would actually call them, but you do see it in a lot of media. It's like a special episode or a special chapter or volume or whatever where things are just totally different. I know that the Monogatari series had a it was a much later season or volume or whatever the fuck they call it, where yeah, things were completely flip-flopped and just totally fucking different. And this is no different from what a lot of other stories do. They do this like one-off. You've been transferred to a different world where things are just different. Things worked out or things didn't work out in certain ways, and that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's just being connected to Rika's whole world-jumping deal in a way where, okay, this one is just fucking weird. But in another way, it's weird in a good way. In a bad way for Rika because she's all alone, but in a good way for a lot of other people here because there's no tragedy at all. There's always tragedy in the canon route that we got out of, I'm not going to say canon route, but the successful route that we finally got out of Chapter 8. Yeah, there's going to be permanent tragedy there. Satoshi's probably never going to wake up and be the same as he was before. He's probably going to have some permanent issues going forward because of how long he was out. There's no reviving their parents. There's no reviving Rika's parents. There's no reviving the Hojo aunt. There's none of that. There's no reviving the people that died due to the syndrome. So here, all that tragedy doesn't exist. So you can argue that's good, but this isn't the Higurashi when they cry that we know. The Higurashi be crying for other reasons. Nonetheless, an interesting story so far. Maybe I'm a sucker for these. I don't know. They can get a little old because, like I said, so many stories, so many pieces of media do this sort of thing. So it's not totally like new and different. And I kind of forgot about this whenever I was talking about which of these chapters or stories that we're going into is canon. None of them are canon. Nothing really canon exists. And I think Ryukyushi does not or did not have any involvement in these stories. I think it was just chapters 1 through 8 and that was it. So everything else he is not on board with, which is fine. that's totally okay. That leaves a lot of creativity up for other people, you know? As long as they do it right, which is a hard task. But yeah, we'll end it here. Thank you all for watching the first episode of this. I have no idea how long all these chapters are. I don't think they're that long, so this whole playthrough shouldn't be too long if I keep the episode lengths, I don't know, around like an hour or so. This one will be the odd one, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I guess we'll see. Thank you all for watching this episode. If you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz, so you guys are ready to go for the next one. And I will see you guys all in that next one. Take it easy.